You know what I mean? It's YouTube and Path of Exile. That's what we do. We're just hanging out.
Please listen to my question carefully. Who are they who have not yet menstruated?
Tell him, listen.
It doesn't say yet.
So what, let's read again. Let's read again. Pregnant women.
Yes, pregnant.
So you're saying pregnant women haven't menstruated is what you're saying. So in other words, to save Islam, you now need to become primitive, backward, and deny even basic scientific knowledge. That's what you have to do right now, yeah? Islam is a pedophilia ring. We're dealing with that. Islam is not just a sex cult. No, this is serious. Islam is not just a death cult, not just a sexual sex cult. It is also a pedophilia sex cult. We're dealing with some very serious issue right now. When did you really wake up that you suddenly realized 6-year-old children are eligible to be married? Where did you get this idea from? How old was Muhammad, by the way, at that time?
I have no idea because
But you're a Muslim, you're...
Yeah, I'm a Muslim.
Yes.
I don't know how old he was at the time, but he was older.
Very old man.
Okay, let's see.
It's a terrible sex ring. You're a Muslim, so please tell me, sir, why is this? Why is Islam not a sex cult? Please explain.
Because, as Muhammad said, right, you can only have intercourse when you're married.
Excuse me, sir. Do you know that in Islam you can marry your daughter-in-law?
You can marry your cousin, yes.
Daughter-in-law.
You can marry your cousin, yes.
Daughter-in-law. Do you understand the word daughter-in-law?
You're a liar. Well, we'll prove it.
Do you? Oh, okay. So are you saying the Islam doesn't talk about marrying daughter-in-law?
You
Is that what you're saying?
You can marry your
According to the Quran, do you know you can marry your daughter-in-law?
That's a lie.
According to the Quran, do you know you can marry a prepubescent child?
You're lying.
Prepubescent child, can you marry?
You can marry your cousin.
Prepubescent child, can you marry?
You can marry your cousin.
According to Islam, do you know that you can marry 4 women at a time? Do you know?
Yes.
You know that, yeah? And according to Islam, do you know that you can marry a prepubescent child?
You can't.
No, you can't?
You can't.
So the Quran doesn't. So if we read that, what would you do?
It has to be. It's not in the.
It's not in the Quran. So Surah, if we take Surah 65,
Yeah.
I think 65, let's see.
Jesus married 3-year-old. Moses married.
Look, I told you, the longer you stay here, medicines won't help you. So please move on. Please move on.
You tell lies.
No.
Lies.
So you want to speak
liar.
because Muhammad married a 9-year-old.
No. I'm talking about the Quran right now.
The Quran itself.
No one has a clue if even Muhammad existed. So don't talk about Muhammad. I'm talking about the Quran right
Muhammad
now.
was there, and according to the Roman scriptures, in their scriptures they wrote about Muhammad's people.
Which Roman scripture wrote about Muhammad?
You can see.
Anyway, let's read this first and then we'll talk about other nonsense later. So,
Hi, I'm Victoria Missick, and I teach one of the most diverse acting classes in the world. Working with Adobe Acrobat AI Assistant, I am creating the Business of Acting manual to help others navigate through this industry. The manual of this size would take me maybe a year. With AI Assistant, it gives you a skeleton to follow. I can finish it in 4 to 6 weeks. AI Assistant helps me create the time to create new experiences. It's what I live for.
Why pay over $100 a month for cable when it's half the cost for Fubo TV? Get all the channels you want with all the entertainment you love for the price that cable can't beat. Try free.
Where?
Surah 65.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the name of Surah? What's the name of Surah?
Surah Al-Talaq.
Okay. Surah Al-Talaq. I'll get it in Arabic, the original. Okay, which verse?
65 ayah 4.
4. Okay. I'll get it. Over here it says.
Okay, which...
Surah 65 ayah 4.
يأسن من المحيض من نسائكم إن ارتبتم فعدتهن 3 أشهر واللائي لم يحضن وأولاتنا الأحمال أجلهن أن يضعن حملهن ومن
Why are you wasting your time on him? No, he is an afraid man. Can you see him wearing sunglasses on this day? So you know already he is terribly afraid. He doesn't want to show his eyes even today.
He's saying we can marry pubescent children in the Quran.
Pre-pubescent. It's not just you can marry, you can even divorce them. Pre-pubescent child you can divorce. Let's read. He doesn't know how to read.
The Quran word of Allah first.
No, he doesn't know how to read, so ignore. 65.
He doesn't believe that. I don't need to.
The Quran.
Surah, you can read, can't you?
Yeah.
You can read. Surah 65, Ayah 4. What did you read?
Okay. ولم يحضن وأولات الأحمال أجلهن
If you've taken dope, yeah, watch Zakir Naik, please. Okay. 65 4. What does it say? 1 second, sir.
Here.
65. Excuse me, sir. Pay attention here. We are dealing with the sex cult pedophilia ring. Yeah, please. Those who no longer expect, please. What does it say? Those who no longer expect menstruation among your women, if you doubt, then their period is 3 months. And those who have not menstruated. So, you don't have to. You were afraid earlier. Please stay quiet. The gentleman is reading now. So it's talking about divorce, the time you wait for divorcing. And he's saying those who haven't menstruated. Who are those who haven't menstruated?
Maybe after wishes Muadak?
No, it is the woman that around 12 to 15. If you look at the period age, is around 12 to 15.
He is speaking. He is the one who has read the verse. He is speaking right now.
His English little bit.
He has wonderful English. Don't worry. Your English is terrible. Please wait there, sir. Thank you.
Okay. It's saying
He's saying your English is terrible. Please wait.
Age of 12 to
Say
15.
that tonight.
Age 12 to
Can you see
15.
his back? Do you think he knows anything? Do you think he knows anything? He looks a bit clueless, doesn't he? Please,
Say that tonight. You know the truth, but you hide it.
the cafe is there.
Allah
Please
say
go.
that.
Get some coffee.
Allah say
Warm your
that.
body. Warm your body.
Allah say that. You know the truth. Islam is the truth. Religion.
خليني أكلمه.
We are trying to advance. We're not regressing. We're trying to advance. Please, stay focused. Please.
You know the truth,
Okay.
guys.
Yes, I know the truth. Zakir Naik is confused, mentally ill, in an asylum somewhere. I'll come and help him later, please.
This verse doesn't say anything about marrying pubescent children.
Let's read. So Surah Al-Talaq, what does the word talaq mean?
Talaq, divorce.
Yeah. So this is a chapter which deals with how to divorce people, yeah?
Yes.
That's what the chapter is about. Now, it's now giving you the timeline for divorcing.
when you divorce-
And while giving the timeline for divorcing, in the middle of that, now it provides some specific cases. In verse 4, Surah 65, verse 4, it says, those who no longer expect menstruation, those who are old, very old, they don't expect menstruation anymore among your women, then in their case, you need to wait for 3 months. Yeah? If you doubt, then their period is 3 months. And those who have not menstruated. Now, who among women are not yet menstruated? Who are they?
No, it is
You tell me, sir.
It is women.
Yeah, you stay quiet, sir. You're a bit confused, please. We're talking about
Pregnant.
It is regarding of the woman. Okay, after divorcing, they need to wait for 3 months.
Excuse me, sir. Please answer my question. Who are those who haven't menstruated yet? Who are they?
The women that are pregnant, it says.
No, please stay focused. Answer my question. Who are they who haven't yet menstruated?
Pregnant women. It
Pregnant.
says-
Are you listening right now?
Yeah, it says.
Listen to me. Every word is important, please. Every word is important. Once, please listen to my question carefully. Who are they who have not yet menstruated?
Look at the other guy.
It doesn't say yet.
So let's read again.
Here,
So
this
deal
one,
to
this is-
wait. Let's
This
read.
one. That translation might be false. I don't know, but this translation, look, and
Excuse me, sir. Are you saying Sahih International is not the Quran? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that translation might be.
No, wait a second. Do you know about the Sahih International translation?
Yes,
Wait,
he's wrong.
yes.
No, he is confused here, please.
Because to understand the Quran, it must be read in its original Arabic form. And these English.
Okay, let me please help me understand.
I'm telling you.
One second.
Look at this one. I have the translation here.
One second. Look, what we'll do two things now.
Let me explain.
One second.
Okay, let me
No,
explain.
whoa.
I'll listen to you.
Excuse
I'll
me, sir.
listen to you.
Wait.
Let me explain.
We're going to do two things right now. Okay?
Which is?
I'm going to read the English again, and then I'm going to show you the Arabic word for word translation. Yeah, so you don't have any place to hide. Yeah. Now tell me, I asked you a question earlier, you haven't answered it. It talks about those who have
The other
not
guy in the background.
menstruated. And I asked you a question earlier. He is afraid, so he doesn't answer. Is that your friend?
I'll answer. Brother.
Those who have not menstruated yet, who are they?
Pregnant women.
Okay, listen to me again. Maybe you're not hearing the entire statement.
Pregnant women have periods. Pregnant women.
Okay. Menstruated. Those who have not menstruated.
Yes.
Okay.
Pregnant woman.
Pregnant women.
Yes, pregnant.
So you're saying pregnant women haven't menstruated is what you're
This is how
saying.
retarded.
So in other words, to save Islam, you now need to become primitive, backward, and deny even basic scientific knowledge. That's what you have to do right now, yeah? Excuse me, sir, please listen. Now, your friend is helping now. What he is saying is, he is essentially implying to save the Quran, we have to deny scientific knowledge, have to act a little bit foolish, and have to essentially walk around like someone who doesn't have a clue. That's what he is doing right now, even though he could make sense. Even though he could make sense. My point I'm saying is very simply, if anyone knows, my dear friend, please stay.
Let him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the gentleman. Are you a Muslim also, sir? No, I'm not. No, you're not. Please join in. We're dealing with how Islam is a pedophilia ring. We're dealing with that. Islam is not just a sex cult. No, this is serious. Islam is not just a death cult, not just a sexual sex cult. It is also a pedophilia sex cult. We're dealing with some very serious issue right now.
What's pedophilic about Islam?
Well, if you want to get married to someone who hasn't had menstruation yet, which is a baby, a child, and you dare even to go on to talk about divorcing her, this is not just a pedophilia ring. This is an extremely abusive pedophilia ring.
Give me an example of someone marrying a prepubescent child.
Well, do you really need an example? Are you
Give me an example. Give me an example.
How about thinking about someone who married a 6-year-old?
In Arabic society, you don't see these things happening.
In Arabic, who was Muhammad then? Was he Arabic or was he French?
I'm saying in current society, do you see?
No, wait. Was Muhammad an Arab?
We definitely see.
Was he part of the Arabic society?
Yes.
Did he get married to a 6-year-old?
He didn't.
He did not. Okay, that's fine. No. Whoa. You would deny the obvious. So, my dear friends, how many?
Let me reply to you.
Yeah,
Let me reply to you.
Now.
Okay. You're saying it's a. Okay.
Please.
Okay.
You have the right to reply because we're dealing with a serious problem. You are on the dock. We are dealing with pedophilia, so we need to give you right of reply, please. Yeah, go on.
Okay. So I was talking about Arab current society. If you want to speak about the past, in the past, women were different. It was normal in that time.
In the past?
Yes.
Yeah.
1400 years ago is not the same as now.
So 6-year-old child, 1400 years ago, what was she? Superwoman?
When the woman hit the age of puberty, yeah,
That's when
she's okay to get married. At those times, yeah,
Women
it was okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So now, okay, things have been changed. Women get the age of puberty.
Are you hearing right now? Please listen here, please. You see, earlier, to justify something really terrible and wicked, he had to act as if he is a liar. What did we read here? Prepubescent. Those who have not menstruated. What is the term? Is that pubescent or prepubescent? What is that?
Before that.
If you haven't menstruated it, good. So that's prepubescent. So don't even talk about prepubescent. Okay, now two things. I'm going to ask you two specific questions, yeah? Number one, Islam is not just a regular pedophilia ring. It's a terrible pedophilia ring in that it wants to get married to prepubescent children and want to divorce them. Number one. Number two, the second question is, when did you really wake up that you suddenly realized 6-year-old children are eligible to be married? Where did you get this idea from? How old was Muhammad, by the way, at that time?
I have no idea because
But you're a Muslim,
Yeah, I'm a Muslim.
Yes. Okay. So look, he is looking at you. He is trying to see if you can help.
Okay, wait,
Look at him.
I don't know how old he was at the time, but he was older.
Very old man.
Okay, let's say.
It's a terrible sex ring.
Okay, let's say that was old. This young woman, did she go through puberty?
6-year-old child? You tell me.
Yeah.
When on earth did anyone who is 6-year-old had puberty? When?
No.
Exactly,
Long
so
time
how do
ago.
you-
Look.
How do you know the biological state of women back
Okay,
then?
let me ask you.
It's different.
Let me ask you.
It's not the same
Let
now.
me ask you. How old are you?
17.
You are 17, yeah?
Yeah.
When you were 6-year-old, what did you want to do?
I don't know.
You tell me, please. When you were 6-year-old, what did you want to do? Where did you live?
Watch TV.
Do you remember
You know
roughly?
exactly like he's trying to do. Okay?
I'm trying to
He's
make sense.
do-
Don't listen.
Okay? He's trying to do for you to tell him that a 6-year-old is normal to play video games. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Look.
Yes.
Now,
Yes, exactly.
earlier.
Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Excuse me, sir.
The
Please,
people-
please,
the
excuse me,
people
sir.
long time
Look,
ago-
please. I am a Christian. This is a very serious subject.
Okay.
Please don't joke with me around this, okay?
What do you just now?
A 6-year-old child.
right?
Look,
We're just
please,
having
listen,
a-
please listen.
We're just talking
Please
here.
listen, please
Go
listen.
ahead.
I know. But instead of dealing with the serious issue
Okay.
and agreeing that this is in fact a pedophilia ring, you're now trying to escape by mocking and joking.
No.
Not a good idea.
Not at all.
Excuse me, sir. How old are you, sir?
I'm 30.
Are you married?
Yes.
Do you have children?
Yes.
How old? Do you have any girl?
Yes.
How old is your girl? Or one of your girls?
3 years old. About
3 years old.
Yes.
In 3 years, in 3 more years, I don't even want to make it personal to you, you know.
Okay.
Because in my mind,
Okay.
talking about a 6-year-old getting married is abominable.
Okay.
So I don't even want you to feel uncomfortable when I ask a question. In 3 years, would you like your child to be taken away as a bride by
Okay.
someone? You see?
Okay.
That's
Now-
how terrible it is.
Now, let's start about 6 years old, right?
Yeah.
6 years old, yeah. Habib, tell me like if I'm wrong, brother.
Speak to
yeah?
me, please speak to me.
me
In
like
six,
you're-
a 6-year-old child, do you have any evidence that at any point in history, a 6-year-old child was a woman worthy of getting married, especially to a very old man?
Now, before back your time, yeah, way back, it was 6 years old when if a girl hit the age of puberty, it's okay to get married.
I'm asking a specific question,
Yes.
please. Do you have, one second, please, once, no, excuse me, sir, one second. Do you know of any culture at any point, please listen to my question carefully. Do you know of any culture at any point in time for which you have the record to suggest a 6-year-old child was ready to get married to an old man? Any record anywhere?
And a record
Yeah.
in the time of history. Yes.
Any historical evidence? Because you're living in a delusionary world that you're saying something happened like this in the past. I'd like you to give me some historical record for that.
Historical record for that.
Yeah.
There is no historical record for that.
Yeah.
Okay, that I'm aware of it.
Sure.
But as I know, as if a female hit the age
No, if
of
you don't have historical record, please
Okay.
wait. If you don't have
I
historical,
don't.
no,
I don't.
Okay, good.
I don't.
Sure.
But if a female hit the age of puberty, she's allowed to get married.
6-year-old child. See, wait, I'm talking about 6-year-old. I don't know why you're desperate
You're
about
saying a
puberty.
6-year-old child
I
can't
really
go
don't
through
know.
puberty.
Yeah.
I'm asking you.
because-
Are you
6-year-old.
because I'm asking you a question. Are you
Because
saying a
that's all
6-year-old child can't go through puberty?
Excuse me. Look,
Answer it.
I'm listening.
Yes, sir.
I'm answering right now. Please
point.
listen. Please
Good
listen.
point.
I'm answering right now. I am dealing with serious issues in life, and you want to play pub quiz. Do I know? Don't I know? Please listen. 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 If anyone were to come to me and tell me while I am following a person who got married to a 6-year-old child and challenged me in a public place like
Sorry,
Speaker's
dog.
Corner,
I'm eating
instead of
pizza.
asking
Oh, I'm not
in a pub quiz questions and so on, you know what I would do? You know what I would do? I would say, look,
Answer the question.
I would say, I
You
would
would
say,
refuse to answer the question.
I would say
You're
this.
refusing to answer my question.
I'm not like you. I am a Christian. I would say this is time to wake up. Look, one second.
Thank you, sir, for your-
Now, one second. Let me finish now. You know Jesus Christ on the other hand. I am a Christian.
He married
Jesus Christ on the other hand was so noble that he came to this world for the purpose of saving you and saving him. One second, please. Excuse me, sir. You're a bit confused. Please wait. We'll deal with you later. Now, the thing is,
Jesus says stay away from the
one second. Now, Jesus came so you may leave your confusion and be saved. He was so focused on his purpose, which is eternal redemption, that he did not even have time to get married to one eligible, similar aged person. Now that is a person worthy of respect. Not someone who was going around trying to find out who to get married to next, which 6-year-old child will fall for me, and so on. Now this is very important. Now I want you to, one second, I want you to take this in and think about this seriously. If not now, but when you leave Islam, don't tell anyone. I know this is a shameful thing, and therefore you would, if you think through this carefully, you will leave Islam. If you think through carefully.
Because Christianity and the Bible is a corrupt book.
No, ignore nonsensical points. Ignore nonsensical points. Excuse me, sir. Ignore. Look, I am talking about a period of.
It changed a lot of times.
Are you saying you will?
Bible book has been changed a lot of times.
Are you saying one second?
Okay, it's a corrupt book. There is a lot of contradiction.
Are you saying? Are you saying? Are you saying? One second. Are you saying you are happy to follow a pedophilia ring? Is that what you're saying?
Islam is not about pedophilia.
Finding prepubescent children to get married to and divorcing is abominable. Please leave Islam at the earliest. When you leave Islam, one second. When you leave, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name?
My name is Mu'tasim.
Mu'tasim.
Yeah.
What's your name?
John.
Mu'tasim. When you leave Islam, don't even tell him.
Why?
When you leave Islam, don't even tell him. Okay?
You know what?
Leave Islam, but don't tell anyone else. Because
we will welcome
you know why?
you to Islam.
You know why?
We will welcome you to Islam.
I don't want to be confused. No, I don't. I would never follow a pedophilia ring. A sex cult pedophilia ring. Never interested. Not interested.
No?
Look.
It's not?
Do I look like a... What do I look like? Look.
You look Indian.
Yeah, good. That's good. Now, this is serious stuff. Leave the pedophilia ring before they catch you. Okay?
Are you a YouTuber? Wait, I want your YouTube channel.
Operation Stephen. Leave pedophilia ring. Leave the sex cult. And come follow the precious Lord Jesus Christ. Very important. Good to see you. And come follow the precious Lord Jesus.
Listen, that was a banger. It's going to be really hard to find something as good as that. That was pretty fucking good. You know?
Debate me and try to...
We'll try to find something else, but... You know, Whack 100 getting fucking cracked. That was great. Watched that earlier today.
Next story.
Fucking... What's his name going off? That was a good one.
Hi, everybody. As far as the importation of...
I'm done spending an obscene amount of money on takeout every week. Done.
I'm getting back on track with Factor Fresh.
As far as the importation of African slaves, and then you said there was the exportation of American slaves here in New England as well as in South Carolina. I'm just curious as to what was, or how did they classify these individuals when they moved them from here to other locales? Did they still call them Indians, or they classify them as just like a colored race?
I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, but I'll give a general discussion of classification, and then people can correct me. In the early records, you see people classified by the names of their nations, and I mean Native American nations. As time goes on, you begin to see them classified as things like Mustee. And after a while, you begin to see those who have, who are mixed African and Native American get progressively classified out of the Native American part of their heritage. You begin to get a loss of people's names from the nations from which they come, and they get classified as Indian, and you get a progressive moving out of people who are part Native American, part African American, into African American. So the time that, in the time that I was talking about, which is kind of an earlier colonial period, some of those names still would have been used, but when they get to the Caribbean is when they really get lost into just being called the Indians, because these are exported from the United States because of the rebellions and the revolts, and sold into the Caribbean, where they practically disappear in some of the places that they were expelled to. And that's a different case from the Taino, who always lived there. This is where, this is where they were from. But the ones who were expelled from the United States, parts of the coast down, and they gradually kind of disappear into the population, intermarrying with enslaved Africans primarily, in the case of the Caribbean. In the case of enslaved Africans, a lot of times the classification comes out of the port by which they left Africa and come to the New World. It doesn't mean that those people are necessarily from that area. They could be in the general hinterland and then get that name and come. In the case of Native Americans, it's different. The one that I showed for Brazil, remember this is very early Brazil. This is like early 1600s. Brazil is founded as a colony in the 1500s. And this expression, negros da terra, blacks of this land, is something that the Portuguese.
Dang, I never do that. Yo. I knew it was all over the world, but yeah, that's a far away. Dang, yo, let somebody black say they were a slave and pull that shit with me now. Now I'm gonna say
The names of the people who lived in the area are on the coast, especially were Tupinamba, and others, as you go further into the Brazilian interior. But all along the coast, those people were
Ain't no
Tupi.
race car gonna work on me no more.
So to call them negros da terra is something that the Portuguese, or let's say the Spanish and the Portuguese, are beginning to do a classification as they wish to classify people. So they're classifying them as blacks of this land. And then the ones who are being brought in slightly later from Africa are classified as blacks from Guinea or blacks from Angola. Those would be the two earliest for this place. But you are right. Your implication is that these names are mixed up, made up, and in time replace the actual names that the people call themselves.
Yeah. Thank you.
I greet you. Shalom. Yeah. So, we know that we had slavery, right? We know that we experienced slavery between Africa, Europe, North America, and South America, And this slave trade was called the triangle slavery trade, or the triangular slave trade, because it took place between 3 or 4 continents, but mostly between 3 continents. So it was forming something like a triangle on the Atlantic trade. Some call it the transatlantic trade, which is true. It took place along the transatlantic. However, there is history that we are not being told. There is a history that we are not told. And one thing you must understand is that historians, the people who write this history, are very selective. They are stereotypical. They are subjective, they are biased. These people write history that they want to favor them. They write history that they want to put themselves in the position of attaining mass empathy. And so some things might happen that they will not show you. But nature has a way of restoring history. Nature has a way of keeping documentation of what happened within itself. you know, in as much as they might try to hide the history that happened from the general community, we still find ways of finding the truth. That is why we have people like archaeologists. Archaeologists are here to dig, are here to extract, they are here to tell us history, how it always been. For example, during the shipment, or rather during the movement of the Israelites from Egypt to Israel, you know, they had to cross the Red Sea. It was just recently that it was discovered the remnants of the Pharaoh's wheels. Those, you know, Kitambo, they used to use chariots, and Pharaoh was following the Israelites with chariots. Now, as they were chasing them along this split Red Sea, God closed it and they got drowned. Historians never ever accepted this fact. It was just up until recently that archaeologists found these remnants. You know, they found the wheel of a huge chariot. We didn't have cars in the past, it was chariots. And the design of the chariot, of that wheel, was likened to the Pharaoh of that time during Moses. It is called the long expedition. Okay, let's forget about this. We have this black American professor who is like our archaeologist, you know. She tells us that let's stop believing everything that we read. Let's start believing on the facts. Let's start believing on the empirical evidence that shows black people and Indians, or rather Indians or Red Indians, the way you choose to call them, collaborated with the black people and they fought against the slave master. This is history that is not told because someone somewhere does not want to show himself losing. They want to show themselves winning. And now I want us to watch this video, listen to what the professor has to say, and then by the end of the video, I shall share with you my thoughts, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis.
I learned two things from my elders, both here and in Africa, that are very important to me. And so I want to begin my remarks with those two things. The first thing is that whenever you are standing on soil where the bones of others may be buried deep down below, you begin everything with a salutation of respect to them, even if they're unseen or unknown or unrecognized. So I want to do that first. And secondly, and this is from my grandmother, she always told me, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. In the matter of tonight, what I have is a little knowledge. There are numerous scholars, some of them my colleagues here at Brown, who are making the study of Indian slavery one of the focuses of their work. More importantly, there are historians of the nations and of the communities, of Native Americans and others in this region who know far more than I do about the history of Indian slavery. So my task is to try not to be dangerous, in honor of my grandmother, yet add something useful to the collective pot so that we can have a good discussion. I'm going to do that by focusing on a few thoughts around the question of Indian slavery, which have come up in my own work. That work is not so much about slavery as it is about the kinds of interactions, usually contested and in conditions of violence and duress, but also which occasioned the exchange of knowledge, which took place between indigenous people, enslaved Africans, and colonizing Europeans in the Americas and in Southern Africa. In the interest of time, I want to do this by images. I hope that this setup works. If not, you're going to have to imagine what I'm saying. And I'll give the briefest of remarks about 3 historical spaces on which my thoughts have been focused in the past, over the past decade. And we might be able to return to some of them later or on another occasion. The first set is going to be about Dutch Brazil and the early 17th century sugar plantations. The second set is from New England to the Caribbean. And the third set is Long Island, from Long Island to Providence, and the Harlem Renaissance. And we'll see if this actually works. Yeah, okay. Except that's not the right one. It's okay. These are just covers of the kinds of natural histories, in other words, the colonial archive that I spend a lot of time looking at. So you get very old histories of the first European natural historian who goes to Barbados or to Jamaica or to Brazil or to Haiti. A lot of these are actually held in here, original copies, in the John Carter Brown Library. I want to spend a moment on this one, which is from Brazil. This is actually the first natural history of Brazil. You can see the European imagination working and how they see the Native Americans, or the Tupi-Namba people, as they call themselves, in Brazil. And the interesting thing about this, this old first natural history of Brazil for me is that I'm always thinking about the knowledge of plants, so the knowledge that enslaved Africans, and in this case in Brazil, the enslaved Tupi-Namba, because everywhere in Latin America, it's first the Native Americans who were enslaved, and then when that doesn't work in some kind of way, Africans are brought in. So the reason why this book is important, done by Willem Piso and George Margraaf, is that it was done in the time when the Dutch briefly held Brazil. Now, we know Brazil is a Portuguese colony, but in the 1640s, the Dutch were holding Brazil, and the governor, Count Moritz of Nassau, thought it important to do scientific studies. So he brings over Willem Piso to look at questions of plants and the knowledge about plants. And in this time, we remember that the knowledge about plants is like knowing where gold and diamonds and oil are later on in history. So Piso does this book, and what do you find when you see the book is that the Tupi-Namba and the enslaved Africans are there on these early sugar plantations at the same time, and they're exchanging knowledge with each other. Most of the book is about what he calls the simples, which are the medicinal plants, the herbal medicines of the Tupi-Namba. But occasionally you find a page like this one that's shown there, where he reports that the Africans are teaching the Indians how, or the indigenous people, how to use particular plants. And so you begin to get a notion of the plants that the Africans managed to bring over, or that were brought over in the slave ship, like sesame, eggplant, and okra. And you also get a sense of how the Tupi-Namba are teaching the enslaved Africans about some very important plants, usually maize, but also cassava, which is the bread of the Caribbean. It's the bread of the Tainos, it's the bread of the Brazilians. The terms that were being used by the Portuguese and the Dutch at this time were also interesting. They called the Tupi-Namba in the beginning, when they enslaved them, negros da terra, the blacks of this land. And the ones who were coming in from Guinea and from Angola, and that's the first set, they are negros de Guinea and negros de Angola. It's an interesting use of the
G7.
Declare to you that the Bourbon Street is
Oh, you can't ignore me.
Yakuza boss here. I would like to give my version of the story. My family and I own a family.
Good morning from Kyrgyzstan. I'm about to take a...
We're also learning more about the 14
Has raised concerns.
So guys, earlier
You have the tech bros that are arguing that, and Elon arguing that no, this
into it, but like the collective thing that we kind of talked about.
Even if it is the writings of Jesus, even if it is the writings of, even of all.
There are many ways that European colonialism changed the world, but the most...
This was me, struggling to keep up with posting consistently on YouTube and getting less views than normal, until I found...
There are many ways that European colonialism changed the world, but the most obvious is the huge number of lives that were lost in the name of growth and expansion. People in the West wanted to find resources, make money, save the uncivilized, and gain prestige. But in the end, it caused death, hardship, and violence for those who got it. Many of the lessons that should have been learned from colonialism seem to still not have been learned. The effects of colonialism can still be felt today, from murder to resource exploitation to loss of cultural identity. Remember that these are just a few of the worst things that happened during European empire. Oh, the terrible, sad, and painful Atlantic slave trade. That's a story for another time. The Belgian Congo, 1885-1908. In 1885, King Leopold II of Belgium took over a lot of Central Africa. He said he would make the Congo Free State more civilized and advanced. King Leopold, on the other hand, took advantage of the land and the people to get ivory, rubber, and wood. King Leopold wanted to show the rest of the world that his small country could be as strong as the big ones in Europe. Rubber brought Leopold a lot of money, and he personally ran most of the Congo until 1908. In the late 1880s and early 1890s, more bicycles and cars were being made, which raised the need for rubber, which Leopold gladly met. Africans were made to work for him. They were supervised by a rubber agent who sent them to the forest in groups and held their wives and children hostage. When the Africans didn't make their quota, they were punished harshly, usually by being flogged. As the need for rubber grew, men had to go deeper into the forest to find mature rubber vines. The Belgians also used slaves to cut down trees and make roads. Men worked so hard that they died. Their families went hungry, and many Africans ran away to the forest to resist. Leopold's men, who were part of a private military group called Force Publique, would just go after them and kill or cut off their hands or genitalia to scare them and make them behave better. After firing a bullet, the Belgian troops were told not to waste it and were told to bring back one hand. After a village rebelled, one FP officer said, "The commanding officer ordered us to cut off the heads of the men and hang them on the village palisades, also their sexual members, and to hang the women and the children on the palisade in the form of a cross. If a soldier didn't have a hand, he would either buy one, trade for one, or cut off the hand of a live person to become his boss." Whole towns were destroyed, and women were abused while their husbands collected rubber. When people from outside the area realized what was going on, they begged Leopold to stop. For example, when George Washington William went to the Congo in 1890, he wrote Leopold a letter asking why there wasn't any civilizing, meaning spreading Christianity, going on and accusing him of being violent. He said that the Belgians were excessively cruel to its prisoners, sending them to the chain gang for the smallest offenses. This kind of government cannot be seen in any other country, civilized or not. Often, these ox chains eat into inmates' necks and leave sores that flies hover around, making the wound worse. This makes the prisoner worry all the time. A shikot, which is a dried piece of hippopotamus skin, is often used to beat the people. When it is put on well, blood usually flows at every stroke. But the horrible things that happen to troops and workers are nothing compared to what the poor natives go through when they are thrown into these terrible prisons here in the upper river for no reason at all. Because of anger around the world over the conditions in the Congo Free State, the Belgian government took over the colony in 1908 and changed its name to the Belgian Congo. Leopold was in charge of the Congo Free State and is said to have made $100 million to $500 million. However, up to 10 million Africans died during his rule. British India and the famines, 1865-1943. To be clear, India, which at the time included what are now Bangladesh and Pakistan, went through many famines when it was ruled by the British East India Company and the British government. Many historians disagree on what part the British played in the famines, but most agree that the British policies, actions, and reactions during each of the famines made more people die. In 1865, there was a famine in Orissa, but the British government decided to ignore it until the British troops started to go hungry. India got rice and other supplies from the British in 1866, but it was too late for many people. Because of this, 1/3 of the people in Orissa died. The British also had the same attitude toward food when 4 to 5 million Indians died during the famine in Madras in 1876 and 1878. During the famines in India in the late 1800s and early 1900s, the British continued to send food to other parts of the empire, but did nothing to help the people of India. These days, the famine of 1943 is getting more notice around the world than the others. During World War II, the British exported more than 70,000 tons of rice between January and July 1943, which was enough food to feed almost 500,000 people. Parents dumped their starving children into rivers and wells because things were so bad. A lot of them killed themselves by jumping in front of trains. People who were hungry begged for the water that had been used to boil the rice. Kids ate grass, yam roots, leaves, and vines. Up to 3.5 million people died during the Bengal famine in 1943. Spain, the Aztecs, and Tenochtitlan, 1519–1521. In the early 1600s, Spanish conquistadors came into touch with the Aztec Empire, which was based in Tenochtitlan and controlled most of modern-day Mexico. When Hernán Cortés arrived in 1519, things quickly turned violent. Once Montezuma II, the king of the Aztecs, heard that Cortés had landed, he sent him gifts in the hopes that they would go back to Cuba, which Spain already ruled with Cortés's help. Cortés burned the other ships so that his men would have to march to Tenochtitlan to get the wealth. Cortés got support from people who were against Montezuma before he got to the Aztec capital. For example, 3,000 Tlaxcalteca men told him to take over the city of Cholula. Cortés destroyed the city, burning it to the ground, and according to his letters, in 3 hours' time his troops killed 3,000 people and burned the city. Another witness, Vasquez de Tapia, claimed the death toll was as high as 30,000. Cortés went on to Tenochtitlan, where on November 9th, 1519, he met Montezuma face to face. People greeted him with gifts and cheers, but Montezuma and his people were afraid of the Spaniards, especially after hearing about the massacre at Cholula. They were homes for Spanish people, like Cortés, who many people thought was the god Quetzalcoatl. In the following week, Cortés betrayed his host by seizing Montezuma on November 16th and making him openly submit to the King of Spain. Cortés made Montezuma look weak, and the nobles of the Aztecs got rid of him, rebelling against both their king and the Spanish. In several fights, Tenochtitlan was taken by both the Aztecs and the Spanish. In August 1521, the Spanish finally took it for themselves. By that time, the Spanish had starved the Aztecs and spread smallpox, which killed off most of the people. According to sources, on the day that Tenochtitlan was taken, the Spaniards committed some of the most brutal acts ever inflicted upon the unfortunate people of this land. The cries of the helpless women and children were heart-rending. The Tlaxcalans and other enemies of the Aztecs revenged themselves pitilessly for old offenses and robbed them of everything they could find. Only Prince Ixtlilxochitl of Texcoco, an ally of Cortés, felt compassion for the Aztecs because they were of his own homeland. He kept his followers from maltreating the women and children as cruelly as Cortés and the Spaniards did. The anguish and bewilderment of our enemies was pitiful to behold. The warriors gathered on the rooftops and stared at the ruins of their city in a dazed silence, and the women and children and old men were all weeping. During the next few decades, the Spanish destroyed all traces of Tenochtitlan and the Aztec kingdom by building New Spain on top of them. As of 1568, only 3 million of the 30 million Aztecs who lived there in 1518 were still alive. The huge number of deaths was mostly due to sickness, fighting, and not having enough food. Boer concentration camps, 1900–1902. There were 2 Boer wars in South Africa. The first one happened in the 1870s and 1880s, and the second one happened from 1899 to 1902. During the Second Boer War, which was also called the South African War, British troops captured Boers, who were Dutch and African, and put them in camps. What did the Boers do? Boers, which is the Dutch and Afrikaans word for farmer, lived in the Transvaal and Orange Free States, which are just north of South Africa, which was ruled by the British. The British were afraid that the Boers would try to take over all of South Africa when Transvaal and the Orange Free State joined forces in 1897. So that wouldn't happen. The British put troops on the line between British South Africa and the Boer states. In 1899, the Boers gave the British one last chance to get rid of their troops. The British refused, and in October 1899, war broke out. For the first 6 months of the war, the Boers were victorious, but the British had more guns and more people. The almost 90,000 Boer soldiers were no match for the 500,000 British soldiers. By 1900, the British had taken over both of the cities of the Boer republics and added the land to their own. Due to a rise in Boer activity, the war went on until early 1902. However, with the Peace of Vereeniging, the Boers were forced to accept British rule. During the South African War, 100,000 British soldiers and 14,000 Boer soldiers were killed in battle. The war's biggest death toll, though, came from the concentration camps that the British set up. The British took men, women, and children from the countryside of South Africa and put them in camps in both Boer republics. This was mostly done to try to stop guerrilla fighting. In September 1901, there were 34 camps with about $110,000 white Boers. As one tourist put it, the camps were terrible. The exile camp here is a good 2 miles from the town, dumped down on the southern slope of a kopje, a small rocky hill, right out in the bare brown veld, with not a tree in sight and no shade of any kind. Around 2,000 to 3,000 people died every month in some camps. By the end of the war, almost 27,000 men, women, and children had died because of how they were treated. This made up 15% of all the Boers living in both countries. There were also camps for black people, but they didn't make as much of a fuss as the camps for white people. Around 14,000 to 20,000 black people died in the British camps. Mau Mau Uprising, 1952-1960. During the 1930s and 1940s, when Britain ruled Kenya, the native Kikuyu tribe kept losing land and the right to farm it. The tribe stayed loyal to the British government, but there were growing opposition movements in Kenya. By 1952, a secret group called the Mau Mau was attacking the British. The British banned the Mau Mau, but they kept getting more members and causing so much trouble and bloodshed that they had to declare a state of emergency in 1952. Notable nationalists like Jomo Kenyatta, who would become president of Kenya, were in the Mau Mau. But after the state of emergency was announced, many of the group's members were arrested. This only made the Mau Mau commit more violent crimes against both British and Kikuyu people. Even though the British sent more and more men to Kenya, the Mau Maus kept attacking for another 8 years. The British began to do sweeps and capture both suspected and real Mau Mau members. They also used collective punishment on towns they thought were hiding Mau Mau members or were supporting the group. There were thousands of Kikuyu and people thought to be Mau Mau who were taken and sent to reservations or camps, where abuse and torture was commonplace, as British guards used beatings, sexual abuse, and executions to extract information from prisoners and to force them to renounce their allegiance to the anti-colonial cause. There is disagreement about how many Mau Mau were killed during this time. The official number is $11,000, which includes 1,090 prisoners shot by the British government. During the 8 years of emergency, only 32 white farmers were killed. According to the Kenyan Human Rights Commission, however, 90,000 Kenyans were executed, tortured, or maimed during the crackdown, and 160,000 were detained in appalling conditions. Spain and the Incas, 1532-1572. In 1531, Spanish conquistadors Francisco Pizarro and Diego de Almagro came to what is now Peru and found a society in trouble. There had been a civil war between Huáscar and Atahualpa over who should lead the kingdom. The Inca were coming off of that. Even though Atahualpa won, he and his people still had problems with fighting among themselves. Aside from the fight for power, there were also smaller tribes in the Inca kingdom that didn't like being ruled by the Incas. With 80,000 men behind him, Pizarro met Atahualpa in November 1532. The meeting was calm, but both men planned to kill the other the next time they saw each other. Pizarro struck the Inca the next day and killed 7,000 men while holding Atahualpa hostage. The Spanish had a lot more weapons than the Incas, who only had spears and arrows and didn't lose any soldiers in the fight. Over the next 8 months, the Inca gathered silver, gold, jewels, and other valuable things to make their captors happy. It's not clear if Atahualpa tried to sell himself or if the Spanish offered to let him go in exchange for money. The Spanish happily took all of the rewards, but in the summer of 1533, they put Atahualpa to death. He was supposed to be burned at the stake, but he was gagged instead after he and the Inca decided to become Christians. When Atahualpa died, the Inca didn't have a head, which made them even easier for the Spanish to take over. Over the next 40 years, the Spanish slowly took over every Inca city and stronghold. In 1572, they took full control of the empire, even though locals were still fighting in small groups. Overall, the Spanish presence in the New World caused a lot of deaths through smallpox and other diseases that spread quickly, as well as through war, especially when the Inca kept rebelling against them. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the Spanish killed between 50 and 90% of the people who lived in the Andes mountain area of South America. The British and Australian Aboriginal massacres, 1790s, 1890s. Between the late 1700s and early 1800s, people from both the Netherlands and Great Britain came to Australia to settle. However, only the British stayed and chose to colonize the island. When British ships came to New South Wales in 1788 to start a settlement, they got along well with the native Aboriginal people at first. Aboriginal people's lives were getting more and more messed up by Europeans, so resistance groups formed. Britain, on the other hand, kept using New South Wales as a prison colony, moving groups of criminals to the edges of the empire to get rid of them. From 1788 to 1823, most British people who came to Australia were criminals or sailors. Starting in 1793, though, free settlers began to come. Several groups of Aboriginal people were killed by British troops in the New South Wales area in the 1810s, 1820s, and 1830s. In 1816, 14 Aboriginal people were killed at Appin after they crossed into British territory in search of food. Between 50 and 100 innocent Australian natives were killed at the Waterloo Creek Massacre and the Mile Creek Massacre of the Kamilaroi people in 1838. A very hard year. The British slowly started to explore and take over more of the island. When they came across Aboriginal groups, they killed more of them. In Victoria, between 60 and 200 Aboriginal people were killed at Portland in 1833 and 1834. 20,000 Kurnai lived in Gippsland in 1840. By 1853, there were only 131 left, and by 1857, there were only 96. Even though no one says they all died brutally, it's likely that hundreds did. The 1830s in Western Australia saw harsh raids against Aborigines who were thought to be stealing chickens. This was because the daring and hostile conduct of the natives induced me, Captain Irwin, to seize the opportunity to make them sensible to our superiority by showing how severely we could retaliate their aggression. The exact number of attacks and killings by the British in Australia against the Aborigines is unknown, but it is thought to be quite high. But not all of these deaths were due to fighting. It was easy to get sick, and because the native groups didn't have any defenses, a lot of them died. There were 750,000 Aboriginal people living in Australia when the British first came there. That number had dropped by 90% by 1920. A lot of Aboriginal people were killed, and others were taken from their homes and put to work on farms. They had to deal with difficult conditions and didn't have any freedom. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was standard practice for British authorities to take Aboriginal children and place them with Europeans to watch over them. This meant that thousands of young Aboriginal people were taken from their homes. About 10 to 30% of all Aboriginal youth were taught in a way that was based on European ideas. They were also given new names and told or even forced to give up their native languages and customs. French Algeria, 1954-1962. As the French lost control of their colonies around the world, they tightened their control over Algeria. Algeria was taken over by France in 1830 after Ottoman rule failed, and a lot of French settlers, known as Pieds Noirs, moved to the North African land. After 1848, the French thought of Algeria as part of France. When settlers took over land, many farmers and peasants were forced to move to poor areas. By the 1870s, about 1/3 of the original Algerian people had died from disease, starvation, and early resistance. Algerians sometimes fought back against the French, but the large number of European settlers made things more difficult for everyone and led to the rise of a resistance movement in the early 1900s. In 1945, there were a number of peaceful protests in Algeria. The people were celebrating their win over Germany in the war and also wanted independence. The French responded with violence. During the May 1945 protests in Sétif and Guelma, French troops fired on the protesters and kept up their harsh actions for several days. There are different counts, but according to the Algerian state, left 45,000 people dead. European historians put the figure at between 15,000 and 20,000. Algerians fought back against French colonization, which finally led to war between the natives and the French. The different groups in Algeria that wanted the French to leave formed the Front de Libération Nationale in 1954. They fought a war for independence until 1962 with the Armée de Libération Nationale. The French bombed Algeria and razed towns and villages by arresting people, torturing them, and bombing them during the Algerian War for Independence. People were tortured by burning, electrocuting, torturing them with water, and hitting them. An ex-French general named Paul Ausseresses said, "Only rarely were the prisoners we questioned during the night still alive the next morning. Whether they had talked or not, they had generally been neutralized." Estimates for the numbers of Algerians killed during the war vary from 90,000 to 1.5 million. French Haiti, 1790s-1804. In Haiti in the late 1700s, slaves and gens de couleur, or free people of color, worked together to fight French colonial rule. From 1791 onward, hundreds of French settlers were killed by slave revolts and attacks on plantations by Maroons, who were slaves who had run away and were hiding. This made the French troops respond violently and harshly. There were many horrible things that French troops did in August 1791. They killed 6 blacks who were chained up in the hospital and 2 who were completely blameless, as well as the 50 shot in trenches prepared in the town cemetery, and the 20 black brigands who had been captured, put on a boat, and drowned in the sea. By the end of 1791, Toussaint Louverture had become the leader of the rebel army. In 1794, the French had to end slavery in the colonies. It seemed like Louverture was on the side of the French, but he kept working for his own government and rule in Haiti. In 1801, Napoleon Bonaparte sent French troops back to Haiti to sort things out like they were before. This caused another war. Even worse, fighting broke out between the two sides. Black people killed settlers and any white people they could find. The French set up a ship as a mass murder machine. Black people were pushed down into the hold and suffocated by poisonous fumes. The ship's name is the Stifler. On January 1st, 1804, Haiti was declared a free state. The goal of the slave revolt was reached, but 400,000 people died during the Haitian slave revolt as a whole. Most of them were slaves or other Haitians. Louverture, on the other hand, was caught in 1802 and sent to France, where he died the next year. He never found out that the revolt he had been so active in had been successful in the end. German Namibia and the Herero Genocide, 1904-1907. Germany owned a lot of land in Africa, including what is now Namibia, which was called Southwest Africa back then. After the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, which gave Africa to different European countries. Germany took over Namibia, negotiated its borders with Angola, which was controlled by Portugal, and made plans with Britain to allow Germany passage to the Zambezi River in the east. Germans started taking land and cattle from the local Herero and Nama people in 1890. In the 1890s and early 1900s, there were uprisings against German rule. In 1903, German troops and local groups fought a battle. When Herero groups refused to move to areas, both sides started to move toward war. One Nama chief was shot in a fight over a goat. In early 1904, 100 Germans were killed by African troops. At first, the Africans had more soldiers than the Europeans, but by August, the Germans were ahead. Germany then moved the Herero and Nama groups to reservations and camps over the next 2 years. Lots of prisoners of war in the camps were used as slave labor to build railways, docks, and buildings throughout the country. Germany gave orders to kill everyone, which were explained by Lieutenant General Lothar von Trotha, who was in charge of the colonies. The Herero people will have to leave the country. If the people refuse, I will force them with cannons to do so. Within the German boundaries, every Herero, with or without firearms, with or without cattle, will be shot. I won't accommodate women and children anymore. I shall drive them back to their people, or I shall give the order to shoot at them. Germany and the Nama were at war until 1907, during which time 65,000 to 80,000 Herero lives and around 10,000 Nama lives had been lost. This made up about 80% of their total population. Dutch East Indies, 1945-1949. In the 1600s, the Dutch trade empire included the islands of Sumatra, Java, and parts of Borneo. These were called the Dutch East Indies. In 1602, the Dutch set up the Verenigde Oost-Indische Compagnie, or VOC, also known as the Dutch East India Trading Company, to control the spice trade in the area between the Indian and Pacific Seas. In 1600, the British started their own trading company called the British East India Company. The Portuguese, who were already losing power by the late 1600s, were their main rivals. In 1619, the VOC set up its business headquarters in Batavia, now Jakarta, East Indies. The company controlled trade in the area until it went bankrupt in 1799. After that, the Dutch government took over and changed the names of the islands to the Dutch East Indies. Through the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, the Dutch controlled the East Indies until Japan took them over during World War II. The Dutch East Indies didn't want to be ruled by the Dutch again after the war finished, so they started a war for independence. In 1945, the Dutch East Indies, which would later become Indonesia, came out on its own. The Dutch and the other Allied powers didn't believe the story, so troops were sent to Indonesia to take it back under English control. Between 1945 and 1946, battles showed how strong and dedicated the Indonesian military was to the cause. As a result, there were several attempts to make peace. The government of Indonesia, which had just become independent, had a hard time getting started, but they were still able to stop the Dutch when peace talks broke down in 1947. In the 2 months that the Dutch fought to take over Sulawesi in 1946 and 1947, they killed about 4,000 Indonesians, led by Captain Raymond Westerling, who used what would become known as the Westerling method. The Dutch commandos would surround a village during pre-dawn hours, searching the residents and their homes. Anyone found with a weapon was shot on the spot and his house burned. The rest were herded into an open field. The men separated from the women and children. Any suspected terrorists were brought forward, condemned, and summarily executed. The worst retaliations of the war happened in the Netherlands after police action began in 1947. The Dutch sent 120,000 troops to Indonesia to keep peace and order during 2 big police actions. As one former soldier put it, I didn't shoot them, the Indonesians, but I tortured and beat them up. They fell over when I put them out in the sun. I wasn't told to do it. You get used to it over time. Isn't it awful? I tortured people on my own, not because they told me to. I meant to do a good job. Indonesia became its own country in 1949, but it's hard to say how many people died during that time. the Dutch suffered 6,000 deaths as a direct result of war. Indonesian casualties are almost impossible to calculate. Irish potato famine, 1846-1852. During the Irish potato famine in the middle of the 1800s, about 1 million people, or up to 25% of the Irish population, died of hunger or illness. Another 1 million people had to leave Ireland or were kicked out. These famines, like the ones in India, were not caused by the British Empire. However, British policies and actions made them worse and killed more people than they should have. In this time period, Ireland was part of the British Empire. When the potato blight first showed up in 1845, England didn't do much to help. In Ireland, potatoes were the main food. It is now known that a plant pathogen caused the crop failures of the 1840s. These failures robbed the Irish of food, feed for their cattle, and a good to sell abroad. Queen Victoria got rid of the corn and grain rules that made food in Ireland more expensive than potatoes. She also started shipping grain and corn to the country, but most people couldn't afford it, there wasn't enough, and many didn't know how to cook the new foods. People were being kicked out of their homes because they were poor, so owners started setting up charity houses and workhouses all over the country. During the famine, Ireland continued to send a lot of goods out of the country, which fed people all over the world at the cost of Irish men and women. Along with ending help programs like soup kitchens, the British government took a laissez-faire stance and waited for the economic and social problems to get better on their own. Amritsar Massacre, 1919. With the start of the Raj in 1858, the British Empire took direct control of India. When the 1800s and early 1900s came around, England put a governor-general, also known as a viceroy, in Calcutta and ran India from London. England kept hiring Indians for lower-level government jobs, but the rise of Indian nationalism and 1800.
Right.
And we know when the Nazis designed their eugenics program to sterilize and abort those they deemed inferior or undesirable, they looked to one nation as their example, the United States of America. For decades, the United States was a world leader in applying eugenics to its own population. Politicians passed laws to prevent entire races from entering the country. Universities taught their students the benefits of selective human breeding. And activists were hailed as heroes for calling for the sterilization of the
Imagine
I think I know what the others are in the A Song of Ice and Fire books, and I think I can prove it. At least as much as it can be proven without more books coming out.
Imagine standing near a quiet and one door close. Does it mean
Chinese youth
Ukrainian people.
Hi everyone, it's Katrina.
Ladies and gentlemen,
The Joro.
Today we're going to be talking about an Argentinian model who was murdered after finding out the dark truth about the entertainment industry in her home country. Today we're going to be talking about an Argentinian model who was murdered after finding out the dark truth about the entertainment industry in her home country of Argentina. Natasha Jate was born on August 13, 1977 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In a 2008 interview with Terra magazine, Natasha Jate recalled having discovered her sexuality at the age of 16, growing up with Jewish parents and attending Golda Meir Jewish School.